man at the pinnacle of his success, living in a glass penthouse overlooking Central Park, makes a choice. He chooses a life of fleeting passion over unwavering loyalty. He chooses a new glittering prize over the woman carrying his unborn child. He casts her out with nothing but the clothes on her back, believing she is a footnote in his grand story. But he never thought to ask about her past, about the secrets locked away in her bloodline. He was a self-made millionaire, but she was about to become something else entirely, an heiress to a fortune so vast it could buy and sell his entire world 10 times over. This is the story of how the deepest betrayal ignited the greatest comeback, proving that karma isn't a myth. It's a reckoning. The air in the penthouse on the 78th floor of 157 was always sterile recycled and faintly scented with the white gardenia diffusers Jonathan Sterling insisted upon. It was the smell of wealth Serafina Hayes used to think. Now, it smelled like a beautiful lie. At 6 months pregnant, every scent seemed amplified, and the gardenias were starting to feel cloying, suffocating. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hand resting protectively on the gentle swell of her stomach, and watched the tiny, frantic lights of New York City blur into a glittering tapestry below. It was a view that cost $26 million, a view that was meant to be a testament to their love, their success, their perfect life. Jonathan was the architect of this life. A real estate magnate who had clawed his way up from a middle-class upbringing in Queens to the apex of Manhattan's skyline, he was a man sculpted by ambition. When they met, she was a freelance art curator with a passion for obscure Renaissance painters, and he was a charming, relentless force of nature who saw her not just as a partner, but as the perfect final touch to his masterpiece of a life. He loved her quiet elegance, her gentle nature, the way she made their cold, modernist apartment feel like a home. Or so he said. Lately, the architect was spending more time admiring other buildings. The signs were small at first, almost laughably cliché. Late nights at the office that stretched into the early morning. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume. Something sharp and musky, like Chanel Coco Noir, clinging to the lapel of his Brioni suit. The way he angled his phone away from her, a sudden sharp movement that felt as violent as a slap. When she gently questioned him, he'd mastered the art of loving gaslighting. "Sarah, baby, you're being sensitive." "It's the pregnancy hormones," he'd say, stroking her hair. His touch feeling practiced and hollow. "This new development deal in Hudson Yards is a monster. I'm doing this for us, for our son." He always brought it back to their son, the little boy they'd already named Leo. It was his ultimate trump card, the perfect way to make her feel guilty and irrational. And for a while she believed him. She wanted to believe him. She was building a nursery, filled with hand-painted stars, and dreaming of Leo's first steps on the imported Italian marble floors, while Jonathan was methodically dismantling the foundation of their world. The first concrete crack appeared on a Tuesday. Jonathan was in the shower, his phone left charging on the marble vanity. It buzzed incessantly. Serafina glanced over her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs. She'd never violated his privacy, priding herself on their trust. But trust had become a phantom limb, a feeling she remembered having, but could no longer locate. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The screen was lit with a string of messages from a Chloe Vance. "Chloe, last night was insane. You're a god. Chloe, can't stop thinking about you. That hotel room. Wow. Chloe, Send me a pic from the gala tonight. Need to see my handsome man all dressed up. Chloe. Don't forget about the deposit for the new condo. The one with the view I wanted. A new condo. Not their condo. A condo. The word swam before her eyes. It wasn't just a fling. It was an investment. He was building a new life, a parallel existence while she was nesting in the ruins of their old one. The sound of the shower stopping jolted her back to reality. She dropped the phone back on the counter as if it were burning hot. Her mind, a maelstrom of shock and sickening clarity. All the little pieces clicked into place, the business trips to Miami. The extravagant charges on the black card for jewelry she'd never received from places like Graff Diamonds. The sudden disinterest in feeling the baby kick. He walked out of the bathroom, a towel slung low on his hips, radiating the casual arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. He smiled at her, a perfect, white, predatory smile. Morning, beautiful. Big night tonight. The Children's Foundation. Gala. You feeling up to it? Serafina looked at him. Truly. Looked at him for the first time in months. She didn't see the man she loved, the father of her child. She saw a stranger. A well-dressed, handsome stranger with a heart of ice and a talent for betrayal. The gardenia scent was overwhelming now, and she felt a wave of nausea. I'm not feeling well, she managed her voice, a fragile whisper. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. A shame. It's important for us to present a united front. My biggest investors will be there. You know how this works, Sarah. It's all about image. He walked to his closet, a vast walk-in affair that looked more like a luxury boutique, where the navy Roland Mouret gown. It's elegant, and it hides the bump well enough. He didn't want to celebrate their coming child. He wanted to hide it, to hide her. In that moment, Serafina understood. She wasn't a partner anymore. She was a prop. And tonight at a gala meant to raise money for vulnerable children. Her own child's father was going to stand on a stage and sell the world a beautiful, perfect lie. A lie she was no longer willing to live inside. The gilded cage had never felt smaller, its bars never colder. She knew with a terrifying certainty that settled deep in her bones that their life as she knew it was already over. The only question was how brutally he was going to tear it all down. The hours leading up to the gala were a silent, agonizing ballet of pretense. Serafina moved through their cavernous apartment like a ghost, the unspoken truth hanging in the air between them, thick and heavy as velvet curtains. She put on the navy gown. It was a beautiful dress, a relic from a time when she believed his gifts were tokens of love, not expensive gags. The dark silk clung to her changing body, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her, a life now tethered to a lie. She watched herself in the mirror, a stranger with haunted eyes and a pale, drawn face. Jonathan was oblivious, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He was a whirlwind of self-importance, adjusting his custom-made Tom Ford tuxedo, fixing the diamond cufflinks that had been a gift from a Saudi investor, and barking orders at his assistant over the phone. He was a man performing on the grand stage of his own ego, and she was merely a background player. "The car is downstairs," he announced, striding into the bedroom. He paused, his eyes sweeping over her. "Good. You look perfect." Composed. It wasn't a compliment on her beauty, but on her ability to contain her burgeoning form to maintain the facade. The ride downtown to Cipriani Wall Street was suffocatingly silent. Serafina stared out the window of the chauffeured Maybach, the city lights that once thrilled her, now seeming cold and indifferent. She could feel his impatience radiating from the other side of the plush leather seat. He wanted her to be the smiling, adoring wife. He needed her to play her part. The moment they stepped out of the car, the performance began. Flashes from paparazzi cameras exploded in their faces. Jonathan's hand went to the small of her back, a possessive proprietary gesture for the cameras. He smiled, waved, and guided her down the red carpet, a king in his court. Inside the grand hall was a sea of jewels, champagne, and calculated power. The air buzzed with the low hum of 1,000 conversations, each one a negotiation, a validation, a transaction. Jonathan Darling. A woman with a surgically tightened face and a necklace of emeralds that could fund a small country, air-kissed them both. And Serafina. You're glowing. Pregnancy suits you. Serafina forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Thank you, Eleanor. For the first hour, she played her role flawlessly. She smiled, she nodded, she made small talk about art and summering in the Hamptons. She felt 1,000,000 miles away, an observer in her own life. Jonathan, meanwhile, was in his element, shaking hands, clapping backs, his laughter booming across the room. He was the center of this universe. And then she saw her. Across the ballroom, standing near the silent auction display, was a woman who could not have been more different from Serafina. She was sharp angles where Serafina was soft curves. Her dress was a daring slash of crimson silk, her lipstick a matching predatory red. She had raven black hair, cut in a severe modern bob. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, and her eyes were locked on Jonathan. It was Chloe Vance. She looked exactly like the kind of woman who would type the words, "You're a god," as if pulled by an invisible string. Jonathan excused himself from a conversation with a hedge fund manager and began to make his way through the crowd, his path leading directly to her. Serafina watched frozen as he reached Chloe. He didn't touch her, not at first. But the way he looked at her, the slight dip of his head, the intimate smile that didn't reach his public-facing eyes, it was a confession, more damning than any text message. Serafina felt the blood drain from her face. She needed air. Excusing herself, she made her way towards a side terrace, her heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm. She pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped into the cool night air, the sounds of the city a distant roar below. She leaned against the cold stone balustrade, taking deep, shuddering breaths. He's quite the showman, isn't he? Serafina spun around. Chloe Vance was standing there, a smug, knowing smirk on her face. She held her champagne flute like a weapon. I'm sorry. Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. Jonathan? He's the star of the show. He always is, Chloe said, taking a deliberate step closer. Her eyes flicked down to Serafina's stomach, and then back up, a flicker of something cold and dismissive in her gaze. You must be Serafina. He's told me so little about you. The insult was perfectly crafted, designed to wound. And you are, Serafina asked, feigning ignorance, her nails digging into her palms. Chloe. We work together, she said, the lie as smooth as the silk of her dress. On the new Hudson Yards project. I'm the lead interior designer. I see, Serafina said, her voice trembling, despite her efforts to keep it steady. And does your work typically involve late nights in hotel rooms and demanding deposits for private condos? Chloe's smirk widened. The pretense was over. Oh, honey. You saw the texts. I was hoping you would. It makes this so much easier. She took a sip of her champagne. You see, you're the past. You're the before picture. You're the starter wife he needed to look stable while he was building his empire. But he's built it now, and he needs a woman who fits not this. She gestured vaguely at Serafina's pregnant form. He needs a powerhouse, not a homemaker. Each word was a poisoned dart. Serafina felt the tears welling hot and shameful. Before she could respond, the terrace doors opened again. It was Jonathan. His face, which had been so jovial moments before, was now a mask of cold fury. He had seen them together. Chloe, go inside, he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Chloe shot Serafina a triumphant look and sauntered back into the ballroom. Jonathan turned to Serafina, his eyes blazing. What the hell do you think you're doing? Causing a scene. Are you trying to humiliate me? You're humiliating me. Serafina choked out the words, finally tumbling from her lips. You're humiliating our marriage, our child. I know everything, Jonathan. I saw the messages. The condo. The hotel's her. For a fleeting second, a flicker of panic crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by an unyielding wall of rage. His charm, his carefully constructed facade, crumbled away, revealing the ugly, rotten core beneath. You went through my phone. After everything I've given you, he hissed, stepping so close she could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. This life, this apartment, that dress on your back, I paid for all of it. You are nothing without me. You came into this with nothing, and you'll leave with nothing. I'm carrying your son, she whispered, her hand instinctively flying to her belly. He let out a short, cruel laugh. A child you probably trapped me with to secure your meal ticket for the next 18 years. It won't work. I'll give you a severance, a small one. Enough to get you started somewhere far away from here. You will sign an NDA. You will not speak of this to anyone, and you will disappear from my life. Is that clear? The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it stole her breath. This wasn't a crumbling marriage. It was a hostile takeover. She had been a business deal, and her contract was being terminated. No, she said, a spark of defiance igniting within her. I won't just disappear. You will, he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. Or I will make your life a living hell. I will drag you through a custody battle that you have no prayer of winning. I will paint you as an unstable, gold-digging whore to the world, and I will win. Because I am Jonathan Sterling, and I always, always win. He turned and walked back into the gala, leaving her alone on the terrace, the cold wind whipping around her. The beautiful glittering party inside suddenly looked grotesque, a dance of devils. The unraveling was complete. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had threatened to erase her very existence. She was standing on the edge of an abyss, and the man she had promised to love forever had just given her a final brutal push. The eviction was swift and merciless. Serafina didn't even have time to process the confrontation at the gala. When she arrived back at the penthouse in a taxi she'd hailed with the last $100 in her purse, her keycard was already deactivated. A stoic, square-jawed security guard, a man who had greeted her by name every day for 3 years, stood by the private elevator, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling," he said the Mrs., sounding like a cruel joke. "My orders are not to allow you access to the residence. But my things, my clothes, my personal belongings. The baby's room." Her voice broke. She had spent weeks lovingly assembling the crib, folding tiny clothes, and painting a mural of a gentle moon and stars on the wall. "A courier service will deliver a few boxes of your personal effects to an address of your choosing. Tomorrow." The guard recited his tone flat and rehearsed. "Mr. Sterling's assistant will be in touch to arrange it." It was the language of a corporate firing, not the end of a marriage. She was being downsized. She stood there in the opulent, silent lobby, wearing a $10,000 gown with no key, no wallet, and nowhere to go. The joint bank accounts, she would soon discover, had been systematically drained, leaving only a few $100s. The credit cards in her name were cancelled. Jonathan had been planning this for weeks, meticulously cutting every cord that connected her to his life and his fortune. Her first few calls went to voicemail. Friends or people she had thought were friends were suddenly unavailable. They were his friends, she realized with a sickening lurch. Their loyalty belonged to the man who hosted the extravagant parties and funded their favorite charities. Desperate, she called the one person she knew she could count on, her old college roommate, Anya Sharma, a struggling theater actress living in a cramped fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens. Anya didn't hesitate. "Get in a cab, now. I'll pay for it when you get here." The journey from the heart of Manhattan's Billionaire's Row to the working-class streets of Queens felt like a descent into another world. The glittering towers gave way to brick apartment buildings and bustling bodegas. It was a world Serafina had left behind, a world Jonathan had taught her to look down upon. Anya's apartment was tiny, cluttered with scripts and playbills, and smelled of incense and garlic. But it was warm. When Anya opened the door and saw Serafina standing there, lost and broken in her designer gown, she wrapped her in a fierce hug. For the first time all night, Serafina allowed herself to break sobbing into her friend's shoulder until she had no tears left. The weeks that followed blurred into a grim montage of survival. The promised boxes arrived, containing only her old clothes from before she met Jonathan, a few sentimental trinkets, and a brutally impersonal check for $10,000. The accompanying letter from his lawyer called it a final, generous, non-negotiable settlement. There was nothing from the nursery. No ultrasound pictures, no baby books, no hand-knitted blanket her own mother had made before she passed away. It was a calculated act of cruelty meant to sever her from their shared past and their child's future. That $10,000 had to last. Serafina found a small, dreary basement apartment in a less than desirable part of Brooklyn. It was damp, the single window looked out onto a concrete wall, and the sound of the upstairs neighbors' arguments was a constant soundtrack. But it was hers. She bought a second-hand mattress, a hot plate, and a few pieces of mismatched furniture. Her days were spent navigating the labyrinthine bureaucracy of social services, applying for Medicaid, and trying to find freelance work. No one wanted to hire a heavily pregnant art curator with no recent references. Her world had shrunk from the sweeping vistas of Central Park to the 4 damp walls of a subterranean room. The shame was a physical weight. One afternoon, while waiting in line at a food pantry, she saw a glossy magazine at the checkout stand. On the cover was Jonathan and Chloe beaming. The headline read, "Power Couple, Jonathan Sterling and Design Maven Chloe Vance on Love Life and Building the Future." In the article he was quoted as saying he was happier than he'd ever been, and that he was looking forward to a future unburdened by the mistakes of the past. He made no mention of a wife or a child. She had been completely and utterly erased. The loneliness was the worst part. It was a cold, constant companion. She would sit in her small, dark room, her hands on her belly, feeling Leo kick, and she would be flooded with a terrifying mix of love and fear. She was his sole protector, his only hope, and she felt so profoundly, hopelessly inadequate. Some nights the despair was so deep she could barely breathe. She would curl up on her lumpy mattress, the sirens wailing outside, and wonder how she was going to survive, how she could possibly bring a child into this bleak, unforgiving world. Winter came blanketing the city in a sheet of unforgiving ice. The heating in her apartment was temperamental at best. She spent her days wrapped in a threadbare blanket, nursing a single cup of tea to warm her hands. Her savings were dwindling at an alarming rate. She sold the last piece of decent jewelry she owned, a pair of simple pearl earrings from her mother, just to make rent and buy prenatal vitamins. This was rock bottom. This was the hell Jonathan had promised to create for her. He had succeeded. She was alone, pregnant and penniless, living in the shadows of the city he commanded. She had nothing left to lose. And in that barren, desperate place, a tiny, hard kernel of something new began to form. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something tougher, colder. It was resilience, a quiet, stubborn refusal to be broken. She would not let him win. For Leo, she would find a way to crawl out of this abyss, even if she had to do it one bloody fingernail-scraped inch at a time. The coldest winter of her life had frozen her tears, and in their place a quiet, unyielding strength began to take root. It was a Tuesday in late February, the kind of bleak grey day that made the city feel like a concrete prison. A biting wind rattled the single grimy window of Serafina's basement apartment. She was 8 months pregnant now, and her body ached with a weariness that went bone deep. She had just returned from a fruitless job interview for a receptionist position she was overqualified for, but didn't get the polite rejection still stinging. Her dwindling bank account hovered just above $200. Taped to her door was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was utterly out of place in the grimy hallway. The paper was heavy, expensive card stock, and the return address was a law firm in Mayfair, London, Penhaligon and Crest. Her name and address were written in elegant, old-fashioned calligraphy. Her first thought was that it was from Jonathan. A new threat, a new legal maneuver to intimidate her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tore it open with trembling fingers. The letterhead was embossed, the language formal and dense. It wasn't from Jonathan. It was a summons of sorts, an urgent request for her presence regarding the estate of a Mr. Alistair Blackwood. The name meant nothing to her. She read the letter 3 times. Her brow furrowed in confusion. It spoke of a last will and testament, and her being named as a primary beneficiary. It had to be a mistake, a scam, some cruel, elaborate hoax. She almost threw it away, but something stopped her. The sheer quality of the paper, the official tone, the specificity of her name, Serafina Ann Hayes. They knew her maiden name. The letter included a number for their New York affiliate office and a prepaid international calling card. With a sense of weary absurdity, she made the call. A crisp, British-accented paralegal confirmed the letter's authenticity and arranged a meeting for the following afternoon at an office on Park Avenue, a world away from her current reality. The next day she spent an hour agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on the only clean, professional-looking maternity dress she owned. The journey back into Manhattan felt surreal. As she stepped into the hushed, mahogany-paneled lobby of the law office, she felt like an imposter. The receptionist, a severe-looking woman with perfectly coiffed grey hair, looked down her nose at Serafina's worn coat, but showed her into a conference room with a breathtaking view of the city. A few minutes later, a man in his late 60s entered. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a Savile Row suit, with kind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He exuded an aura of quiet, unshakable competence. "Mrs. Sterling. Or do you prefer Miss Hayes?" he asked, his voice a gentle, melodic baritone. He didn't wait for an answer. "Let us say Miss Hayes. I am Arthur Penhaligon." He shook her hand. His grip was firm and reassuring. "I think there's been a mistake," Serafina began immediately. "I don't know anyone named Alistair Blackwood." Mr. Penhaligon gave a small, sad smile. "Please, sit." He opened a thick leather briefcase and laid out a file. "Alistair Blackwood was your maternal grandfather." Serafina stared at him, dumbfounded. "My grandfather? That's impossible. My mother was an orphan. Her parents died in a car crash when she was a baby. That's what she always told me. That Mr. Penhaligon said gently is the story Alistair instructed her to tell. It was a fiction they both agreed upon. The truth is somewhat more complicated." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother, Eleanor Blackwood, was not an orphan. She was Alistair's only child, his beloved daughter. But she fell in love with a man he did not approve of, your father, a humble university librarian. Alistair was a man of immense wealth and influence. He came from old money. He expected his daughter to marry within their circle. When she chose love over legacy, he gave her an ultimatum: end the relationship or be disowned. She chose your father. The story was so outlandish, so dramatic, it felt like something from a novel." Serafina sat in stunned silence as he continued. Alistair cut her off completely. He was a proud, stubborn man, and he came to regret his decision profoundly, especially after your mother's untimely death a decade ago. He tried to find you then, but you had just married Mr. Sterling and changed your name. You had, for all intents and purposes, vanished into a new life. He respected your mother's choice and decided to watch over you from a distance, never wanting to intrude. He passed away 2 weeks ago, at the age of 94. Mr. Penhaligon slid a document across the polished table. It was the first page of Alistair Blackwood's will. He spent the last 40 years of his life building one of the world's largest private logistics and technology empires, Blackwood Global Holdings. He never remarried and had no other children. In his will, he named your mother as his sole heir. In the event of her passing, the entire inheritance passes to her only living issue. To you, Miss Hayes. Serafina's eyes scanned the page, her mind struggling to comprehend the words. The entire inheritance, she echoed weakly. What does that mean? Mr. Penhaligon looked at her directly, his gaze steady and kind. It means that you are now the sole proprietor of Blackwood Global Holdings. The portfolio includes controlling interests in global shipping lines, several major tech startups, a vast international real estate portfolio, and a private equity fund. There are properties in London, Geneva, and Hong Kong. There is also, of course, the liquid capital. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Ms. Hayes, I know this is a shock. To be precise, after probate, your net worth will be in the vicinity of $27 billion. The number didn't register. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros, with no connection to her reality of counting loose change for bus fare. 27 billion. Jonathan's entire net worth, the fortune he had built his identity on, was estimated at around 200 million. It was a rounding error in the Blackwood estate. She began to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the hysterical, unhinged laughter of a mind pushed beyond its limits. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. Tears of shock, of grief for the family she never knew, and of a wild, unbelievable irony that was almost too cruel to be real. Mr. Penhaligon waited patiently until her laughter subsided into shaky breaths. "I understand this is overwhelming," he said softly. Mr. Blackwood foresaw this. He left very specific instructions. "My firm's purpose is to guide you, to protect you, and to help you assume control of your legacy. Our first order of business is your immediate security and well-being. A secure residence has been arranged. A team is on standby to handle any and all of your current difficulties." His eyes held a flicker of something else, a deep professional disdain. "We ran a thorough background check, of course. We are well aware of your situation with Mr. Sterling." Serafina looked down at her swollen belly, at the life that Jonathan had dismissed and discarded. She thought of the damp basement, the food pantry lines, the crushing despair. And then she looked out of the window at the city skyline, at the towers of glass and steel, where men like Jonathan Sterling played God. He had cast her into the dirt, believing she was nothing. He had no idea she was the heir to a kingdom that made his look like a child's sandcastle. The faint knock of fate had not just opened a door. It had blasted a hole through the wall of her prison, revealing a world of power and possibility she could never have imagined. The shock was beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, clear, and galvanizing thought. This wasn't just a lifeline. It was a weapon, and she was going to learn how to wield it. The transformation was as swift as it was absolute. Within hours of leaving Arthur Penhaligon's office, Serafina's old life ceased to exist. A black, bulletproof Cadillac Escalade whisked her away from the world of walk-ups and subway grates. Her new home was the entire top floor of a discreet, ultra-secure residential tower in Tribeca, a paparazzi-proof building with a private elevator and a dedicated security team. The apartment was a sprawling expanse of understated luxury, with warm woods, soft fabrics, and breathtaking 360-degree views of the Hudson River and the city. It was opulent, but unlike Jonathan's cold penthouse, it felt like a sanctuary. On a table in the living room was a small framed photograph of a beautiful smiling young woman with Serafina's eyes. A note from Mr. Penhaligon lay beside it. "Your mother, Eleanor. Your grandfather kept this on his desk." The first few days were a blur of managed activity. A team of discreet professionals descended upon her new life. A personal chef prepared nutritious meals tailored to her pregnancy. A financial advisor gave her a gentle, simplified overview of her new assets. A security chief detailed the measures being taken for her and her unborn child's safety. She was given a new phone, a new laptop, and a simple black credit card with no set limit. The first purchase she made was a new warm winter coat. But this was not about indulging in luxury. Arthur Penhaligon was a firm and methodical mentor. "Alistair did not leave you a fortune, Ms. Hayes," he told her during one of their first daily meetings in her new home office. "He left you an empire, and an empire requires a ruler." He began her education immediately. He didn't swamp her with incomprehensible financial data. Instead, He started with the story. He told her about her grandfather, a brilliant but ruthless man who built his empire from a single, rusty freighter after the war. He told her about Blackwood Global's ethos of quiet dominance and long-term investment over flashy, high-risk ventures. He brought in the heads of the major divisions, shipping technology, real estate, to brief her. They were older, serious men, initially wary of this unknown, pregnant young woman. But Serafina listened. She didn't pretend to understand everything. She asked intelligent, insightful questions, drawing on her art curator's eye for detail and her quiet, observant nature. She absorbed information like a sponge. 2 weeks after the meeting that changed her life, Serafina went into labor. She gave birth not in a crowded city hospital, but in a private, pre-booked suite at Mount Sinai, attended by the city's top obstetrician. She held her son Leo in her arms and felt a wave of love so fierce and powerful it eclipsed everything else. Looking at his perfect, tiny face, she made a silent vow. She would not raise him in the shadow of his father's cruelty. She would raise him in the light of his mother's strength. She would build a world for him, where he would be safe loved and proud of the name he carried, not Sterling, but Hayes. Motherhood changed her. The lingering vestiges of the timid, heartbroken woman Jonathan had discarded were burned away by the fire of maternal devotion. Her focus sharpened, her resolve hardened into tempered steel. While Leo slept in his beautifully appointed nursery down the hall, she would be up late into the night, poring over balance sheets and investment proposals with Mr. Penhaligon. Her public profile remained non-existent. The Blackwood Empire was notoriously private, and Penhaligon's team ensured it stayed that way. To the world, and more importantly, to Jonathan, Sterling Serafina Hayes had simply vanished. He likely assumed she had taken her $10,000 settlement and crawled away to some forgotten corner of the country. He had moved Chloe into the penthouse and was plastering their glamorous life all over social media and the society pages. He was hosting parties, closing deals, and celebrating his freedom. He had no idea a financial titan was being forged in a quiet apartment less than 5 miles from his front door. Serafina's first major executive decision came 3 months after Leo's birth. The technology division of Blackwood Global had the opportunity to acquire a struggling but innovative green energy startup. The board was divided. It was a risk. The numbers were borderline. Serafina spent a week personally interviewing the startup's young, passionate engineers. She saw not what the company was, but what it could become. It resonated with her desire to build a better future for her son. "We'll acquire it," she announced in a video conference with the board. "And we will fully fund their research and development. This isn't about short-term profit. It's about legacy." Her tone was calm, quiet, but held an unmistakable note of command. The board, accustomed to Alastair's decisive leadership, recognized the same steely core in his granddaughter. They voted unanimously to approve. It was her first taste of real power, and she found that it suited her. She began to change physically as well. The quiet, almost apologetic presence was gone. With the help of a personal trainer and a stylist, she regained her strength. She cut her long hair into a sophisticated shoulder-length style. Her wardrobe was rebuilt with bespoke, elegant pieces from designers like The Row and Loro Piana clothes that whispered wealth rather than screamed it. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw a victim. She saw the CEO of Blackwood Global Holdings. She saw Leo's mother. One evening, Mr. Penhaligon came to her with a new file. It was thick and detailed. "It's time," he said simply. She opened it. Inside was a complete, exhaustive dossier on sterling properties. It detailed every loan, every investor, every pending deal, every legal vulnerability. Jonathan's entire empire was laid bare on a few hundred pages. His biggest and most ambitious project, the one he'd called his monster deal, was a luxury residential tower in Hudson Yards. He was leveraged to the hilt to finance it, relying on a final round of funding from a Swiss investment firm to complete it. The Swiss firm Vector Capital has been a quiet partner of Blackwood Global for over 30 years. Mr. Penhaligon said, a slight, grim smile touching his lips. "They owe us a great deal of loyalty. They are, shall we say, open to our guidance on this matter." Serafina looked up from the file, her eyes cold and clear as diamonds. Jonathan had tried to destroy her future. Now she held his in her hands. The heiress had spent months learning her new role, consolidating her power and healing her wounds. The time for hiding was over. The time for a reckoning had begun. The downfall of Jonathan Sterling was not a loud, dramatic explosion, but a quiet, calculated implosion, orchestrated from the serene, sun-drenched home office of the woman he had tried to erase. Serafina's revenge was not born of frantic passion, but of ice-cold strategy. She approached the dismantling of his empire with the same meticulous precision she had once used to curate an art exhibition. Every piece had its place, every move its purpose. The first step was silent. Acting on Serafina's authority, Vector Capital Jonathan's crucial Swiss investor pulled its $800 million line of credit for the Hudson Yards project, citing a sudden portfolio realignment. The official notice was delivered via a sterile email devoid of emotion. For Jonathan, this was a catastrophe. The news hit his desk on a Monday morning. He was over-leveraged, with contractors demanding payment and deadlines looming. Without that final round of funding, the entire project, the crown jewel of his career, would collapse. He scrambled, calling his contacts at Vector, but was met with a polite, impenetrable wall of corporate jargon. The decision was final. Panic began to set in. He started calling other banks, other investors trying to secure a new line of credit. But word travels fast in the tight-knit world of high finance. The sudden pullout by a conservative firm like Vector was a massive red flag. No one wanted to touch a project that was suddenly radioactive. Every door he knocked on was politely but firmly shut in his face. The second move came a week later. A little-known subsidiary of Blackwood Global's real estate division, a shell company called Bedrock Acquisitions, began quietly buying up the corporate debt Sterling Properties held with its primary lenders. Jonathan had used aggressive leverage to build his company, borrowing heavily against his existing assets. Bedrock Acquisitions, flush with the near-limitless cash of the Blackwood empire, bought that debt for pennies on the dollar from banks that were now nervous about a potential default. In the space of 2 weeks, Serafina, through her shell company, had become Jonathan's primary creditor. He was in effect now in debt to her. He had no idea, of course. He just knew that his financial world was shrinking, the walls closing in with terrifying speed. The pressure began to show. The confident, swaggering magnate was replaced by a haunted, desperate man. There were furious, whispered arguments with Chloe in expensive restaurants, overheard by gleeful gossip columnists. Chloe, who had been attracted to his power and success, had little patience for his stress and mounting failures. The shopping sprees slowed, then stopped. The talk of a summer on a yacht in the Mediterranean was replaced by tense silence. The final act was a masterstroke of corporate theatre. With the Hudson Yards project on the brink of foreclosure, a new buyer emerged, a mysterious ultra-private holding company. Another of Serafina's creations, called Phoenix Legacy Group, made an offer to buy the entire stalled project, along with the controlling interest in Sterling Properties itself, for a fraction of its original value. It was a low-ball offer, an insult. But it was the only offer on the table. It was either accept it or face total bankruptcy, public humiliation, and a barrage of lawsuits from his other investors. His back against the wall, Jonathan was forced to arrange a meeting with the principal of this Phoenix Legacy Group. He hoped to negotiate to appeal to their business sense to salvage some piece of his crumbling kingdom. The meeting was set for a neutral location, a top-floor conference room at the offices of Penhaligon and Crest, the same place where Serafina's new life had begun. Jonathan arrived looking haggard. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He walked into the conference room, ready to plead his case to some faceless corporate raider. And then he saw her. Serafina was seated at the head of the long, polished table. She was not the broken, pregnant woman he had thrown out into the cold. This was a different person entirely. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse and a sharply tailored black suit that spoke of quiet, immense power. Her hair was sleek, her expression calm and unreadable. At her side, looking on with quiet approval, was Arthur Penhaligon. The color drained from Jonathan's face. He stopped dead in the doorway, his mouth agape, a litany of confused emotions. Shock, disbelief, dawning horror playing across his features. "Serafina," he stammered. "What? What is this? What are you doing here?" "I believe you're here to meet with the principal of Phoenix Legacy Group," she said, her voice even and cool, betraying none of the turmoil she felt inside. "That would be me. Please have a seat, Jonathan. We have a lot to discuss." He stumbled into a chair, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "This is a joke. This is impossible. How could you— You never once asked about my family, Jonathan," she said, cutting him off. "You were never interested in my life before you. You just assumed I was— nothing. That I came from nothing. It was a rather costly oversight on your part." She slid the acquisition offer across the table. "This is the deal. You will sign over your company and all its assets, including the penthouse. In return, Phoenix Legacy will assume all of your debt and liabilities. You will be left with nothing. The exact same position you left me in. But I'm feeling generous. I won't leave you on the street. I've arranged for a severance. $10,000. She pushed a cashier's check across the table, the same amount he had given her. The symbolism was brutal, and it landed with the force of a physical blow. He stared at her, his face a mask of desperation. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, pleading weakness. "Sarah, please, don't do this. I'm sorry. I was a fool. We can fix this. Think of our son." It was the first time he had mentioned Leo in almost a year. The desperate, transparently manipulative plea sickened her. "His name is Leo Hayes," she said, her voice dropping laced with ice. "And you will never speak his name again. You gave up the right to be his father when you threw his mother out with nothing but a dress and a broken heart. This isn't about emotion, Jonathan. This is business. You taught me that. Image is everything. Present a united front. These were your lessons. She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. You have 24 hours to sign. If you refuse, we will call in your debt. And I will personally see to it that you are so buried in litigation, you'll never see the light of day again. Arthur will show you out. Jonathan was left sputtering, a broken man in a room that symbolized his complete and utter defeat. As Serafina walked out, she didn't feel a rush of triumphant joy. She felt a quiet, solemn sense of closure. She had not destroyed him out of hatred. She had done it to protect her son's future and to reclaim her own narrative. The architect of her pain was now trapped in the ruins of his own making, while she, the woman he had deemed worthless, was the architect of it all. Karma had been delivered not by fate, but by her own hand. In the weeks following the hostile takeover, the last vestiges of Jonathan Sterling's world were swept away. The news of his spectacular fall from grace ripped through the city's financial and social circles. The media, which had once celebrated his genius, now feasted on his demise, painting him as a cautionary tale of hubris and greed. His photo was no longer on the cover of Forbes, but splashed across the pages of the New York Post, showing him looking disheveled and gaunt, leaving his lawyer's office. Chloe Vance, true to her nature, abandoned the sinking ship the moment the money dried up. She was gone from the penthouse before the ink was even dry on the acquisition papers, taking with her a small fortune in jewelry and designer clothes. Her parting shot was a scathing anonymous interview with a gossip blog detailing Jonathan's failures and branding him toxic. He lost his mistress, his reputation, and his status in one fell swoop. The beautiful life he had killed his marriage for had proven to be nothing more than a mirage. Serafina never moved back into the 157 penthouse. The place held too many ghosts. Instead, she had the entire apartment professionally cleared out and donated the contents to a charity that helped furnish homes for domestic abuse survivors. The apartment itself became a corporate asset of Phoenix Legacy Group. She had no desire to live in the monument to her past pain. Her home was the warm, light-filled sanctuary in Tribeca, with Leo's happy gurgles echoing through the halls. One afternoon, a month after the takeover, she received a call from Anya. "You won't believe who's working at the coffee shop down the street from my apartment," she said, "making lattes and trying very hard to be invisible." It was Jonathan. Stripped of his assets and reputation, with legal fees mounting, he had been forced to take a menial job to survive. The king of Manhattan real estate was now serving cappuccinos in Queens. A part of her, a small wounded part from long ago, might have felt a grim satisfaction at this news. But the Serafina of today felt only a distant pity. His fate was no longer her concern. Her world was infinitely larger now. She poured her energy not into reveling in his downfall, but into building her own legacy. She proved to be a natural leader, possessing her grandfather's sharp instincts, but tempered with an empathy he had lacked. She championed the green energy startup, which was now flourishing under her investment. She established the Eleanor Hayes Foundation, a major philanthropic organization dedicated to supporting single mothers and providing arts education in underprivileged communities. She was becoming known not as some mysterious heiress, but as a shrewd, compassionate, and visionary business leader. Her days were full. Mornings were for Leo Giggle's story time and trips to the park with a discreet security detail keeping watch. Afternoons were for running a multi-billion-dollar global empire. She found a balance between motherhood and the boardroom that felt natural and empowering. She was surrounded by a small, loyal team, with Arthur Penhaligon as her trusted consigliere, and Anya, whom she'd hired to run the arts division of her foundation as her steadfast friend. One crisp autumn evening, about a year after her life had been irrevocably changed, she was leaving her office late. As she stepped towards her waiting car, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Jonathan. He looked terrible, thin, poorly dressed, his face etched with desperation. "Sarah, please," he began, his voice raspy. "Just talk to me for a minute." Her security detail moved forward, but she held up a hand, stopping them. She looked at this man who had been the center of her universe, who had caused her unimaginable pain, and she felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was a distant scar. "There's nothing to talk about, Jonathan," she said, her voice calm and firm. "I'm sorry," he pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for your forgiveness, for another chance, not for me, but to know my son." Serafina looked at him, and for the first time saw him for what he truly was. A small man, made weak by his own greed and ego. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give, Jonathan. That's something you'll have to find for yourself," she said, her voice softening slightly, not with affection, but with finality. "But Leo, he has a good life. He is happy and safe and loved, and he will be raised to be a kind, strong, and honorable man. He will be everything you were not. That is my priority. And you are not and will never be a part of that. Goodbye." She got into the car without a backward glance and drove away, leaving him standing on the pavement under the harsh city lights. She wasn't looking back at the wreckage of her past. She was driving toward her future. Her story wasn't a fairy tale of a woman saved by a sudden fortune. It was the story of a woman who was handed a tool and through her own intelligence, resilience, and strength of character used it to save herself. The money had been the catalyst, but the power had been inside her all along. As the car sped through the glittering streets of Manhattan, she smiled. She was not Jonathan Sterling's discarded wife or Alistair Blackwood's surprise heiress. She was Serafina Hayes, and she was just getting started. This was a story of ultimate betrayal, but more importantly of ultimate resilience. Serafina's journey shows us that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the very thing that allows us to build a foundation for a stronger future. Her karma wasn't a passive twist of fate that fell from the sky. It was a path she carved herself using the resources she was given to right a terrible wrong and build a legacy of strength for her son. It reminds us that our true worth is never defined by who we are with or what we have, but by the strength we find within ourselves when everything is taken away. What did you think of Serafina's epic comeback? Was her revenge justified, or did she go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and empowerment, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of karma and triumph. Thank you for listening.